Welcome back, folks. It's our special edition of Release It this evening. For those of you just joining us, we have with us Superintendent Vannie Curwen and Attorney at Law Ruggles Ferguson. And of course, at this time, we welcome our viewers of GBN Television 7 and 11 and viewers on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So, Mr. Ferguson, I'll come to you. We listened, Superintendent, earlier before the break. I understand everything he said. I understand the intention. But I am concerned, though. In all of that, there are still laws, and the laws are there. And the laws were not just placed there for the sake of having a law, but the laws are there to ensure that we maintain peace, we maintain stability, and we avoid, situations that are unwanted to happen. Now, when there is disregard for law, and the police uses what I might refer to as a light-handed method. Now, mind you, I am not promoting, the police going and starting to beat people or shoot anyone. But when that approach is taken, the tolerant approach, and so there are concerns about the signals that are sent, because there are those who feel that the situation in Riversally, when missiles were thrown at the police, and I think from what I picked up in the news, an officer got injured. We also saw another situation in Montrose where an officer was pushed to the point where he had to draw his pistol because a civilian threatened to beat him up. Aren't we concerned that the tolerant approach can be sending signals that are incorrect? Mr. Ferguson, your take on this? You are still muted. Your microphone is muted. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sorry. I was saying it's all about balance, and Superintendent also use the word taking a measured approach, because one spark, the approach you take may out the spark, or that spark may explode into a major fire and many people can get hurt. Now, we have to view all of this in a much broader perspective, because the police cannot be effective without the support of the citizen, without the support of critical institutions in society. They have their role to play, but it's important to develop partnerships. So, for example, let us take the issue in Guelph. Now, there was an incident there, people got angry, and again, justifiably so. Now, when people express their anger, different people may express their anger different ways. What you want is not to throw fuel on the fire. You want to out the blaze. And your approach will determine whether or not you out that blaze or you throw fuel on the fire. And I'm saying in circumstances like these, this is not a matter for the police alone to deal with, right? They have a specific role to play. And in my view, they were correct, because no matter what you do, if you react a certain way, some people will say you're too soft. And if you act in a harsh way, then people will cry out police brutality. So whatever you do, you have to accept that you will get criticisms from different sections of society. But it is always better at the end of the day to err on the side of caution, to err on the side of preventing an escalation of violence, to or on the side where at the end of the day you have many injured persons, police having to shoot people to defend themselves. And in circumstances like these, this is where the partnerships are important. So for example, in different communities, we have influential leaders. We have organizations. We have NGOs. Now, they cannot see their role just simply to be a spectator role because that's the police job. Anywhere you have situations where violence can potentially occur, we all have an important role to play. And let me just give you the example, Godfrey, several years ago. I think it was back in 2006, 2007. The Bar Association organized Law Week. We had Law Week every year, and that particular year we were focusing on youth and conflict with the law. And the proposal was this: listen, we have some serious gang issues. You have gang in St. David's, you have Bloods, you have Ginger Crew, and you have these different things. People every day, some act of violence, and every act escalates it because somebody wants to take revenge. And the proposal that year was this: we have a role to play. Yes, it's not a situation where somebody gets arrested and charged by the police, and then the lawyer's role kicks in. And you go to court and you represent the interests of the accused. We have an important role to play in ensuring that there is stability in society, that violence is minimal. And what we did that particular year was this: we partnered with the churches. We got some church leaders and lawyers who were involved in criminal practice. Why? Because again, people confide in lawyers. Lawyers represent people who are charged with criminal activity. And we got them, the leaders of the Bloods then, the leaders of the Ginger Crew. Brought them all into one room. And you had leaders of the church there. You had leaders of the bar. And you had folks involved in criminal practice. Trying to find out, well, what is the root of this problem? And you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the discussion, everybody realized they didn't really have any serious problem with one another, you know. It's about how you dress, who disrespect who say certain things about who, and a man hand get chopped off for that, right? A man gets killed for that, because we abdicate our responsibility and not, listen, enter the fray and say, listen, let's talk to these gang leaders. Now, the police didn't have to do it, right? If you see it as a police role, then the police have to go and speak to gang leaders. And then everybody will be saying, hey, what kind of police we have here? Sitting and negotiating with gang leaders. I'm making the very broader point that this is not an issue for the police alone to deal with. And we have to recognize our role as leaders in society and our roles to save the youth, our roles to minimize violence and be proactive in our approaches. So you had the leaders of the churches, everybody. Now, that has not been spoken about a lot. But there we brought everybody in a room and the leaders shaking hands at the end of the day. Right? And hear them out. Just let them talk. And guide them. Provide the kind of guidance. That is what we need to do as leaders in communities and societies. So I'm saying, when these issues break out, as you have in Grove or in St. Patrick's, it's not about the police alone doing it. And the police too need to reach out to others in the community, critical, and say, listen, we have a situation here. that can escalate, that can get out of control, and people can get hurt. We want you. You know how many retired teachers and principals we have in communities all throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique? And, you know, one of the criticisms I always have is that, you know, we treat retirees in a way that, you know, when people retire, it's like they're sitting down and counting the years towards their grave, as opposed to using that body of experience that these folks have and the respect that people in the communities have for them, especially teachers, especially retired principals, and you get them involved in, and sometimes you have to reach out to them to get them involved in a proactive way. So at the end of the day, not necessarily police who have to negotiate with folks. Now you have the whole principle of community mediation. You see, like a problem in Guelph, and what happened in Guelph? Community mediators should be moving in and even offering their services, so the police don't necessarily have to take that frontline role.
Okay.
And be involved.
So hold that point there, Mr. Ferguson, because I don't want to miss what I want to ask you. You mentioned earlier, and Superintendent Curwen alluded to that as well. An action can do one of two things. An action can either put out the blaze completely, or it can cause that spark to blaze up into a massive fire. I want to bring us to a particular situation, the one in Montrose, where the police officer had to draw his firearm because a civilian threatened to beat him up. All right, I mean, it was clear. We saw it on social media. The civilian approached him, came up in front of the police officer and said, "Look, I'll beat you here today." All right. How was that officer supposed to put out that fire or that spark? I don't know which one of you want. Maybe Superintendent Curwen, let's go with you first on that.
Godfrey, every case has to be taken on its own merit. Every case has its own facts and circumstances. So there is no one method fits all. As police officer, we are trained to weigh the situation. We are trained to weigh the measure of the threat. What happened in Guelph and the response that went to Guelph may not be what will happen going forward in every case. There is intelligence-driven policing. That's where we are now. As I indicated, it is not brute force just moving in and bulldoze everything that is before you. You have to be led by intelligence. You have to know what is happening. And as I said, every case is on its own merit. In this particular situation that you're speaking of, and I do not want to delve too deeply into this particular one, because that matter is sub judice. It is before the court, and so I don't want to say much on it. But to answer your specific question, I believe that what the police officer did, with the exception of a few things which I don't want to speak about, his response was, as you indicated, that was a visible threat. It was a threat that was present. It was a threat that put his life at risk. And under the honest belief principle, if he honestly believed that that threat would have been carried out and put him in harm's way, he was entitled to defend himself. And so that particular situation was not one for negotiation. That was not one for mediation. It was an emerging threat that was unfolding and needed to be addressed. And in that case, that situation is different than the Guelph situation and from situation elsewhere. Always remember, every case, every circumstances have its own facts and its own circumstances, and you have to treat it with the facts and circumstances that it presents. And one situation does not fit all.
Right. Mr. Ferguson, in terms of and a very important aspect of it, in terms of approaches, one, the approach or the response from the citizen as compared to the approach of the police officer. A police officer, let's say, for example, the River Sala situation. There is a curfew from midnight. There are protocols that has to be followed. There are regulations and there are laws that has to be followed. The police, they've moved in to do what they are supposed to do, to maintain peace, to maintain order, to maintain law. We know what happened, but what should be the correct approach of the police in a situation like that, and how should the citizens respond in order to prevent a situation from escalating into something that we don't want?
Right. And that's an important question, Godfrey. You see, everybody in the incident, I think the incident that you speak about with the video, people see the main players, the police and the individual who was riled up, right? And see it in the context of, listen, let's see how the police deal with this, right? It's a movie moment. Let's capture all of it on video, right? No. In that scenario, and that's why I'm saying the role of the citizen again. Obviously, folks are angry. And when folks are angry, any number can play. When everybody cool down, everybody regrets what happened. And you had several people there. Obviously, you see people rile up, and I think if it's the same incident you speak about, then there was some commendable action on the part of colleagues who sees his fellow police officer angry, sees him being abused, and he is reacting and tries to cool him down. On the other end of it, you want to, the citizen, you want to cool it down. The citizen has a role. It's not, let's see how this situation will play out. Let's see if the police will shoot. Let's see if he cuff down the police and everybody watching. All it takes, and that's where, again, public education and our sense of responsibility comes in. That you go there and you try to cool down the situation. And what could have been a loss of life, you know, you may even have situations where people leave shaking their hands and going away. You don't let the situation escalate. So I'm saying, Godfrey, I'm taking it even broader. This police citizen, we have limited numbers in the police force. You have limited numbers. One, I always make the point that it's not like police in the United States and this ingrained system of racism. And so, our police come from the belly of society, right? They grow up like everybody else. They have their own challenges. They pursue police as a profession. And I always say, that is where now you go in your police, you have a greater responsibility than the citizen. And that's where training comes in, because training is critical. One, and two, you have to be able to take talk, right? Take talk while at the same time, you know, enforcing. But you cannot respond as the average citizen would do to escalate a situation. You must know, and you win respect for it. And you know, that's one of the critical features of it. People feel that they need to fight to show their power, but you earn respect at the end of the day. If you see a citizen getting on and a policeman being cool and professional and speaking in a way that tries to calm down and at the same time be firm, that police officer wins respect. But at the end of the day, if the police officer has to use force, nobody will quarrel. They say, well, I'm a real patience boy. But only training can bring the officers to that level.
Superintendent Curwen, what the attorney is making reference to, yes, again, and I agree, and I understand where you coming from. But aren't we mindful that at sometimes that kind of approach by the police can send a signal of weakness and maybe cause a riled up citizen to take his action further?
But let me answer you by saying this. When we move into a situation, and I'm not talking about a spontaneous situation with regards to the video that you're speaking about. So let's go back to the go-up situation. Because we had intelligence, because we had information, we were able to respond the way that we did. Not every situation will require that kind of response. There information we would have that may require us to go in and do the unthinkable, do what we don't want to do. We may have to hurt people in the process, but those kind of thinking has to be our last resort. We will use and employ all of the resources to bring a situation to come with less fatality, less injuries, and that's the approach that we have been taking. It's not that we don't have the means to do it. We do have the means to do it, but Godfrey, we also have to police with sense. Mr. Ferguson was making the point. Our population now is 110,000. Our police force is just about 1,100. You can do that math. And you can see how we can be easily outnumbered. So when we're thinking about using force and when we're moving in, we have to bear that in mind. We may have the guns, we may have some of the training, we may have some of the equipment and the resources that can get us as far as we may want to go. But at the end of the day, we have to live in Grenada after. We want the people to be able to work with us. There has to be a collective response for the maintenance of law and order in Grenada. And I think Mr. Ferguson said it very nicely. It cannot be a police response alone. It cannot be a police responsibility alone. We cannot police Grenada, the 1,100 of us, policing 110,000. Collectively, we all must play our part. We all must respect the rule of law, and we must partner together to be able to keep Grenada safe and peaceful. It is all of us responsibility.
Now, Superintendent, we also have to remember that a police officer, and my good friend here, Attorney Ferguson, made that point earlier in the week. A police officer, aside from the uniform and the firearm, is a regular, ordinary human being with flesh and blood and feelings like some of the very same people out there who at times, react violently towards them. So, are we at a stage where our officers are sufficiently trained, understanding that they can react because of their, natural human nature, can react in a manner similar? I mean, can you fault them for that? They are human beings outside the uniform.
That's an excellent question, Godfrey. We are the product of our society. There is no two ways about this. We are cut from the very cloth that our society presents. What makes the difference with us is that we are trained to think in a particular way, to act in a particular way, and to respond in a particular way. But that doesn't take away the frailty of our human nature. We are human beings like everybody else. And we at times will react as any human will. And that is why sometimes you see police officers go out of the line of the training. It's not that we are not sufficiently trained. If you ask me, I believe our training far exceeds and advances that of quite a lot of our neighbors. We have been in overseas courses and have excelled. And you have been seeing the news how much we excel when we go outside. So we are properly trained. But do not take the fact away from us that we are human beings, we will make mistakes, and we will fall short. When that happens, though, how do we react and how do we respond? Training is ongoing. We look at what is happening, we do our assessment, and we retrain and we retrain. Training is not a 6 months in our police training school that ends there. Training is ongoing. For the life of a police officer, training starts at day one and will continue until day last. We constantly do upgrades. We bring in experts from outside of the police force with different expertise to be able to help us to fit into the modern realm of society. So we do have that training. Our training school, there's always something happening at our training school because we see things happen with police officers. We see where we fall short. We review it and realize or determine there may be need for retraining. If we think that there is need for retraining, there is retraining taking place. So we're constantly upgrading our officers, retraining them to be able to stay with what we expect, the professionalism that we have, set out to become. If we don't constantly doing it, and it's not only for police officers. If you're a lawyer, a doctor, and you're not doing this revision and you're not keep going back, there comes a point when the technology will leave you, the society will leave you, you become obsolete and outdated. In the police force, I am pleased to say that there's a lot of, we are modernizing with time. We are technologically advancing, not as fast as we would want to, but we are trying to keep pace with what is happening. But always remember, we are a product of our society. We come from the very society that we are all part of. We are not superhumans. The difference with us is that we are trained to act in a particular way, think in a particular way, and behave in a particular way. And that is what sets us aside from the rest of the population.
All right, great. Mr. Ferguson, let me come back to you. And I am asking you now about what the laws and the powers that the police officer possess. We know that the police officer, possess certain amount of powers based on the Police Act and all of that. All right. That being said, the citizenry of the country, what should be their response? And you get the feeling sometime when you look at some of the situations with police and some civilians that one, the civilian, and you made the point earlier that there's a lot of outside influence. You mentioned the Black Lives Matter. You hear a lot about my rights and my rights and my rights, and very early in the Montrose issue that came out in the video, I know my rights and all of that. Does a citizen really know their rights and understand the power that the police officer possess to carry out his or her duty?
Godfrey, everybody, everyone has a different perception of what, what rights are, the extent of your rights. And that's why I always believe in public education. That is so critical because you want to know rights in the context of what the laws are, what the Constitution says your rights are, what are your obligations. Because rights also come hand in hand with obligations. So they are rights. And, the whole system is set up in a way to create the kind of checks and balances in society. So, you don't hear about it much these days, but separation of powers. You used to hear that a few years ago, Godfrey. Separation of powers.
Yes, indeed.
The role of the executive, the role of the judiciary, and the role of the legislature. Now remember, the police don't make the laws. The legislature makes the laws. The police don't say, well, after midnight you should not be out. Because just other people have laws in place and put regulations in place, and the role of the police is to enforce. Of course, nobody wants to be restricted. Everybody wants to go where he or she wants to go. And the police have that responsibility now to enforce the laws. But there is a separation of powers. And in that separation of powers principle, you have the executive has this role to play, policy making, the parliament has this role to play, lawmaking, the judiciary has this role to play to interpret the law and say what the law is, to resolve disputes. Now I say that in the context again of the police and the role of the police. And you mentioned earlier, Godfrey, well listen, there's somebody behaving in a particular way. And the police, they're there, they're armed. They can bring the situation under control by using brute force. No, not because the police are armed. That doesn't mean that they can use brute force. It's not a license for using brute force. And every situation is assessed in terms of the peculiar circumstances that you meet. Every situation. And the police officer can find himself in trouble if he then decides, because I have a gun, these two guys are behaving bad there, listen, the easiest thing to do is to shoot them. Case closed. Two guys would never come around and behave bad again. But you know what? The police would get in problems now, because just like everybody else, the police have to follow the laws. And I use the example. Now, there's an interesting development in Trinidad. I mentioned it on the last program, but for those who follow developments in Trinidad, and you know, a few months ago, there was the kidnapping of a young lady, and she was found brutally murdered. Was thrown over a cliff, and there was outrage in all corners of Trinidad and Tobago. You know what happened? Police then picked up a few people. 2 suspects died while in police custody. The language superintendent, they died while in police custody. Right? And you know what is happening now? No. These police themselves are now under investigation, and this week, in fact, the head of the special unit, the special operations unit, was arrested and charged. Right? Now, why? These are guys whose responsibility is to ensure law and order. Right? A situation occurs that causes outrage. Now that again does not justify taking a man in custody and beating him up or killing him. Now, in other words, you now decide to take the law into your own hands. What is your responsibility? Investigate, create a watertight case, and ensure that justice is served. The whole focus now, you know what it has turned on? Police brutality. Right? Everybody forget about kidnapping now. And the focus is police brutality. Right? And I'm just repeating like the facts. Whether or not these police officers are entitled to due process themselves, they may be acquitted at the end of the day. But I'm saying it is important, and that's where training comes in. Because a lot of the problems that occur should never occur. Because simply that folks did not manage the conflict properly. As they're saying in life, there will always be conflict. What is important is how you manage the conflict. Because how you manage the conflict would either take it out of control or cool down the situation. And that's why I'm saying, you know, training and everything is important. But at the same time, too, we need to move away from these traditional approaches about, you know, the role of the police and what the police used to do in 1960, the police still doing now. Society evolves. And what you want to do is to create the kind of partnerships, even the way you treat prisoners, for example. One time, if somebody is arrested, charged, convicted of an offense, and sent to prison, people say, lock him up and throw away the key. Lock him up and throw away the key. And I remember once on a visit to the prison, then Superintendent Superintendent Courtney, who was a reform superintendent. His services were required all through the region. And, you know, he made the point to me one day. He said, listen, some people feel that you come to jail to get punished. But he said jail is the punishment. And what you do, you have these people there, and you try to, while they are there, in this captive situation, you try to develop them. You try to make them better citizens, so when they come out, they can contribute positively to society. So you move away from that old way of thinking that a man goes to jail to be punished, and you make him see as much trouble up there as possible. He comes out angry and commits more crime. You want these institutions to create model citizens in and of themselves. And that's why I'm saying with the police, and they have started initiatives. I mentioned it in the last program, for example. One of the big initiatives of the police was the whole, training. It has kind of scaled down now, but you have to develop trust and confidence among citizens for you to be able to do your work effectively. And you have to find creative ways to go about doing that. So whether it's through exercise, I know in certain stations, you have folks that bring out the community to clean the beach, police and citizen working together, whether it's sports, and you have so many other creative ways where you can come out and think outside the box. I remember, I think it was Golf, one superintendent, where they had, and I was really impressed with the program. I think it was Golf in the station where they were saying there was a slogan: let's try and catch somebody doing something right. In other words, all you're looking for is people do something wrong and you come down on them. Let's try and catch somebody doing something right and commend them. So I'm saying the whole thought process, how you approach policing, that has to change. It's no longer about who more powerful than the other, because everybody must work hand in hand, including the politicians at different sides of the fence, the NGOs and other community organizations, because that is what will make the police more and more effective.
Right, and I like that note you end on, because it sort of set me up for the next question I'm going to ask Superintendent Curwen. The attorney mentioned politicians. We have heard from people time and time again, and I'm sure you gentlemen have heard it, that a lot of times the police officers are not allowed to do or perform their duty effectively because of the interference of politicians. Superintendent Curwen, can you comment on this, please?
Actually, I have to be careful how I see this.
Yes, sure, I have no problem, but I want you to comment on it as well.
I would appreciate the fact that I'm a senior civil servant, and that there are certain rules in the public service that I certain lines I could cross and can't cross. And during my experience, I have heard of what you spoke of. I cannot say personally I have experienced it, but I've heard of it. That's all that I think I would want to say. And that I have never experienced a situation where I was told to do something by a politician or not to do it by a politician. I've never had that experience in all my career. But I have, during the space of my career, heard incidences of that. How true those are, I really can't say.
Okay. Well, I'll rest for now, but I will come back because there's some more information. But we take a short break and we'll be back. Stay with us, folks. Don't go anywhere.
Broadcast.
You under pressure, you under stress, a lot of problem. They on your chest. You under pressure, you under stress, a lot of problem. They on your chest. Release it, 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 release it. Release it, 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 release it.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
You want a hand sanitizer to do 3 things: kill germs, be gentle, and to go where you go. You can get all of that in our hand sanitizer. Hard on germs, gentle on hands, affordable. Remember, hand sanitizers contain alcohol. Keep away from heat and flames and avoid contact with eyes. Available at retailers island-wide.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall defend our islands and our oceans.
to rid our waterways of plastic and other marine litter. We shall fight in the mountains, the valleys, on the coastline. We shall never surrender until every home on every street in our cities, towns, and villages in the OECS learn to reuse, reduce, and recycle plastic and prevent the pollution of our beloved ocean. We shall fight marine litter together with our sports clubs, our churches, the private sector, our schools. Join the fight. We shall never surrender.
This message is brought to you by the OECS Commission with funding from the Government of Norway. Remlit, tackling ocean pollution from tooth to sooth.
Introducing Color by Sissons. 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 Color by Sissons.
We support you at every stage of your life.
For business.
For your education.
For your financial freedom.
For that new ride.
Upgrade your life with the Communal. Contact us today.
Can you spend wisely and have more savings? Yes, you can. Learn more with Money Matters on GBN Television. The Money Matters series explores 12 top ways to save money. In this series, you would learn how to save by setting up your spending money right. Save on vehicle loans, home improvement projects, your credit cards, and even on prescription drugs. Tune in every Tuesday morning at 7:15 for Money Matters, a lighthearted conversation with financial planner Tali Francis. Follow the rebroadcast on Thursdays at 6:50 p.m. and on Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Money Matters is a financial literacy public awareness program sponsored by Republic Bank Grenada.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
Boys, where is he supposed to be here? What happened to you?
Boy, you see, just called me there. You see, tell me she don't go nowhere.
How is that?
She said she worried because every night as she put on she head, she dreaming and it's one set of dream.
What she dreaming?
But she dreaming about jacks, small jacks, big jacks, sprat, flyers, ball. Every night you see dreaming the same thing.
How much is that now?
By and if it's 11. So what that mean?
Well, when you dream about fish, you know what that mean?
No.
Well, I don't want to say it, but you see that bad way?
Dark then?
Yeah. Well, you have to be dark, well. You have to be dark. You have to be dark. He's dark.
Dark is man.
Dark is more than man. Dark is man squared. Folks, what you know happening this Friday on We Culture, we're going to pose the question to Doc and Risi. We want them tell us plain out. We ain't want to hear about no dream bad. That they are come out and say, Doc. Right there on We Culture. Join us. Welcome back. It's our special edition of Release It. Gentlemen, we have opened our telephone lines because the phone has been going quite a while and we are going to engage our listeners. So at this time, let's take our first call. Release It, good evening.
Hello.
Yes, good evening, caller. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. you're talking about, hello? You're talking about policing, eh? And I have experience with police. And we had a police in Gunnery Police Station, Corporal St. John. And I feel we should have this man back in the police force, training the police and them coming in now. Because Corporal St. John brings crime rates. He brings crime rate in Concord, Gunnery from 200 and something to 0 degrees.
Okay, caller. Thank you very much. Superintendent Curwen, coming from this question, within the past, let's say 5 or so years, has there been a decline in the crime rate in Grenada?
Godfrey, that varies. We have seen statistics that goes in different directions and opposite each other. And let me explain what I mean. For a particular quarter of any given year, there are certain categories of crime that are going to increase while others decrease. The converse is going to happen perhaps for the next quarter. What has increased this quarter might decrease the next quarter. Now take it on a yearly basis. We have seen years where in a particular year, certain category of crime are high. And for the next year, that has dropped. Take murder, for instance, as an example. Last year, we have had, I'm not sure of the number, so I don't want to mention it, but I believe it was between 12 and 16 murders or thereabouts. That was last year. By this time last year, we have had 4 murders already. We are in April of 2021. We have not yet registered a murder. But so while there is a decrease in the murder rate for 2021, we have seen increases in some category of crimes for 2021. Crime on a whole rises and falls based on a number of situations that are happening on the ground. The economic situation is one. The climate in the country is another. The engagement of the police force, the community policing, the urge for people who don't want to work to just acquire. So there are a number of factors responsible for the increase or decrease in the crime rate. And we play our part as an organization, and I think Mr. Ferguson made the point. Community policing is where we are heavily strategizing now. We cannot police Grenada without the community. And so that partnership, that engagement, if you notice in recent time, we have been announcing the fact that sex crimes has been on the rise. And there is this debate as to whether sex crimes are on the rise or we have been more reported cases because of the community partnership that we are engaging in. And so to answer your question, Godfrey, some category of crime has increased, while some categories is on the decline.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go back to our telephone and take another call. Release it. Good evening. Hello.
Good evening.
Okay, caller, do me a favor, please. I need you to turn down the volume of your radio or television and listen to us on your telephone. Can you do that first, please? Hello? Okay, well, we lost that call. Callers, when you're calling, kindly turn the volume of your radio or television down and listen to us on your telephone. Let's get back to our telephone call. Really, sir, good evening.
A pleasant good evening to you, Godfrey.
Yes, good evening, sir.
I must commend you, the topics that you choose and the people that you have. I want to be brief in my contribution. First, I must say I commend the officer. He's very, for the want of a good word, he's very explicit in terms of how he express himself as a law enforcement officer. He have been doing so both in a layman terms and for those who understand at a level. His choice of words and everything else, I'm very impressed. And certainly is our dear brethren, Brother Ruggles. we need people like that who could take us across, even though there are situations and circumstances sometimes that get beyond us when we feel justice should prevail and it doesn't happen. But there are people there who are championing the cause, and I respect him. He also brought back to me Curwen, Officer Curwen, whatever his profile would be. He reminds me of our other colleague in St. Vincent, McIntyre. These guys, they're very explicit, they express themselves, and they do good to us. And this is why I say to myself, when we have square pegs in round hole, we have a problem. But when you have people like that who can, champion the cause and step up to the plate, we have to acknowledge them. And my kudos and my sincere appreciation for him for what he have been advocating and been dealing with. And Godfrey, I must say, you picked the topics and the subjects that we need to adhere to and deal with it to the best of our ability. This is all I have to say, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much indeed. Our telephone number 435-2041. Let's get back to the telephone. Release it. Good evening.
Great citizen, good evening. How are you?
Very good.
Good evening to your guests there, Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Curwen. Listen, I'm very impressed, as the last caller has expressed, the topic and the way it's being articulated. In reference to what can be considered, from my point of view, what we see in this defiant disrespect for the Royal Grenada Police Force. Much have been said about the training. I appreciate it, because I know that in today's world and so on, policing evolves, and so we have to prepare our brothers. But there are a couple of things which I like to suggest, if they haven't been considered yet, that they be looked at. One, and I'm not painting everybody with a big brush, the same brush here, but some of the members of the Royal Grenada, and to give them the full name, police force, are very, very poor in communication skills, beginning with their language skills. I don't know if it is what they've come from school with, whatever. I personally believe, based on my own experience, that some people lose respect for the police, the way the police deal with people, their expression towards them too. I also strongly believe that I want to say this, but I have to say it. Listen, what is known as untrustworthiness is one of the reasons to why our people have continually disrespected the police, and it will grow. And when I speak of untrustworthiness, I speak of dishonesty on the part of some of them, incompetence on the part of some of them, and unreliability. And I speak of this in terms of consistency. That's really consistently dishonest. There's another one that I think is extremely important. The police sometimes go beyond their duty. The police sometimes decide what should go to court or not. They deprive people of their right to a judicial officer hearing a matter to give justice to our people, or hearing matters to give justice to our people. And they decide whether or not the matter should go to the court or not. They wipe it under the counter, under the rug, because they know the people and they feel they can cheat others and deprive them of the right to justice. I'd appreciate if these points that I've here outlined be taken into serious consideration, so that somewhere along the line, the people of this here country, but there's another one yet, this is a very provocative one. We're speaking of the Royal Grenada Police Force. Has anyone thought that this Royal Grenada Police Force, which is a manifestation of a monarchic brute force that has come through the history upon us, has anyone thought of this? Maybe as being one of the reasons why your people disrespect the police? as a representation of Her Majesty the Queen, knowing to that we living in a country whose constitution has never been made into law, written by a queen. Think of it, gentlemen. Do have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, caller. Superintendent Curwen, you care to comment on some of the things the caller mentioned?
There is one thing in particular that the caller said that I think he's spot on. And, you know, if I didn't know better, I probably would have think that he was eavesdropping on a conversation that we had at the executive level a couple of days ago. He spoke of communication skills. And in fact, only 2 days ago, the commissioner and I have had a discussion on how we can improve the communication skills of our officers on the ground. In fact, I'm currently now looking at a program that engages that expertise in our community to come in and help us continue to develop on this particular area. Because we do recognize ourselves that we can improve on our communication skills. We do recognize that we're falling short in some of our customer service relations. And this is where we are focusing on in the next quarter of this year, how we can improve those areas that will create less of the antagonistic behavior, you know, that we have seen between ourselves and the community. Our approaches need to be fine-tuned and smooth out at the edges. And those are some of the things that we are currently working on and are trying to implement. The other concerns that the caller spoke about the incompetencies and what have you, in any organization, you would find people at the top, the middle, and at the bottom. That's not only a police-related issue. In any workplace, you will find people of varying degrees of education, intelligence, experiences, etc. And the police force is no exception. We will not hold ourselves out to be that perfect organization, but we're a growing organization that is developing and advancing technologically as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ferguson, let me put this to you as an attorney. And so, what do you think? I mean, you see it from both sides. You've had to come in contact with police officers in court, through providing representation for citizens who find themselves on the other side of the law. Dealing with situations like that, what do you think are some of the shortcomings within our police service that can be improved so that a better relationship can be fostered between the police and the citizenry?
Yes, Godfrey. It is so important. And once that is recognized, it's a matter of working towards it, because you experience as people, attorneys going to court, incidents that really should never happen. Once again, if it's managed properly. And that's where every police officer, I think every leader, but every police officer needs to get some training in conflict management. Communication skills, yes, crucial. Because, as they say, attitude determines altitude. And you need to be able, for example, to speak to members of the public. You may mean well, but you come across disrespectful. And the reaction it invites is a disrespectful reaction. And then an issue develops. Next time somebody gets arrested for insulting language, threatening language, obscene language, and just again over the management of a situation. But conflict management. And all leaders, not just in fact police officers, how do you manage conflict? How are you able to effectively communicate with people? Because you can be respectful but firm. Some people feel that in order to get the point across, I must show that I have the power. I'm the man with power here. I talk, you listen to me. And you talk down to the individual. We live in very enlightened times where people are, speak more about rights. And you have a situation where you come with the old time, as I say, police tactics and approaches. That don't work in the modern era. And there is the need for that that engagement. Godfrey mentioned it on another program, dialogue with other institutions in society so that folks can understand the stresses and strains under which police officers work. Because quite apart from everything, they face issues just like everybody else, right? Conditions under which they have to work. They have to sleep over in barracks that might be in less than satisfactory conditions. And as human beings, we all respond to that and might deal with it, check it out on somebody, in other words, stresses and strains. And that's where the whole professionalism comes in. But the whole approach, even to the justice system, and that's why, you know, everybody, is not just about the police alone. It's about the entire justice system and how we approach it. So, for example, you know, I was in court recently, and in a particular court, and you know, there are lots of times there are these domestic violence issues, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, somebody comes, usually the girlfriend or the wife, they come for a protection order. And it might be some problem associated with alcohol, or people have genuine anger problems. So people have anger problems, and the whole time we are doing it, you're guilty or you're not guilty. Okay, guilty, up to prison. Right? Up to prison. And that has its all social consequences, because the man that goes to prison might be precisely the breadwinner. You know, so there are the programs, these anger management programs, and legal aid and counseling clinic, for example, another institution that does excellent work. So there's a program called the man-to-man program. So part of the punishment now, all right, if people voluntarily decide to go in the man-to-man program, then you suspend whatever sentence. You provide an avenue to treat anger. In other words, it's not everything about punishment and rejecting people, but it's about winning souls too. It's assisting and guiding people, and we need to have these institutions in society. And the particular comment I was making is when the magistrate, the guy who was reluctant to go through man-to-man, he actually went through it, and he enjoyed it, and was praising the program after. In other words, new methods of treating with issues. Now you go to prison, and for years at one time, Richmond Hill Prison, because they go to prison and there's the opportunity to learn something, learn a skill, even for more long-term prisoners. Pursue some form of academic education. You come out of prison now feeling empowered. Not feeling, come out there, everybody calling you a jailbird and rejecting you. But you are able to fit in to society. And these are the issues that we have to look at. Working outside of the box. Working outside. So for example, as Superintendent said, the police have to find new ways of connecting with the community. What are the most creative ways of doing it? How can we utilize former public officers who now have time on their hands and all these rich experiences? How can we utilize them, the teachers, the former principals, to create that kind of stability in society? What we tend to do is to just look at, hey, that is a police job, you know. Or election come, everybody jump up in election and say, well, the government role is to govern for the next 5 years, provide benefits, etc. And we don't look at the role of the citizen in our own democratic process.
Okay, hold it there. So, because I have 2 questions on our Facebook platform that I would like to ask. The first one, let me come back to you, Mr. Ferguson, because I think the other one would take some more detail from Superintendent Curwen. Someone is asking, can a police officer arrest you for obscene language without first giving a verbal warning?
Verbal warning?
That's a question. Mm-hmm.
Right, yes, okay. And the answer is yes. There is no, and again, you might be, but however, and you know, again, society, people use obscene language almost in a very conversational manner. It's part of the lingo. So I would say yes, however, I mean, for what could be seen in the scheme of things as trivial offenses, that again, you don't respond to everything by arresting somebody. Again, maybe the proper thing is to go here, speak to the person, warn them. If they persist, right? In other words, that would be the proper professional approach.
Mm-hmm. The tolerant approach, according to Superintendent Curwen.
Yes, in other words, you show, because not everything. A police officer might see, you know, somebody committed an offense, and you can, you can arrest them, or you can charge them. It's not everything you charge, you know, somebody from, because your part of your role too is guiding. It's to guide people. Right? It's to improve on standards. And you may come in and bring the person in, have a chat with them, you know, warn them, release them.
Right.
You don't clog up the system, you know, with all kind of trivial matters.
Okay, good. So I want to come to Superintendent Curwen now. Superintendent Curwen, a big issue in Grenada. Now, not long ago, the Minister of Agriculture announced that by June, we could be having legislation for decriminalization of marijuana. Well, for small amounts of marijuana. How prepared is the police to deal with that when it happens? Because from what we're hearing, it can happen soon. And if we're talking small amounts, we don't know what it's going to be, whether it's going to be an ounce or a spliff or a roach or whatever it is, but small amounts. How prepared is the police force to deal with that? For example, let's say a group of fellas sit down by the block and decide to light up a chalice.
The Prime Minister has hinted to that position for some time now. In fact, in one of the engagements he has had with the hierarchy of the police force, he has mentioned that. So we have been aware of that for some time. And so we are repositioning ourselves to be able to deal with it when it happens. There have been some inside conversation. In fact, our commissioner has been pointing us in a particular direction where that is concerned. The work has started within the RGPF, but we have to wait until the legislation comes out to know what we can do and what we cannot do. What is the realm of the legislation? What powers does it take away or gives us? And so as it is now, you can be arrested for any quantity. But because it has been hinted that we are going in this particular direction, there has been certain decisions which I do not want to mention on the program tonight. There has been certain decisions that has been taken by the RGPF in preparation for when that time comes. We're hearing that it may be June. When June comes and the legislation is rolled out, we need to critically sit and look at the legislation and reposition our responses under the Drug Prevention and Control Act to see what authority we now have, what leeway that are now given to our citizens, and we will respond accordingly based on what the new legislation says. But we have been preparing. It has been, talked about for some time now, and we are not naive of the fact that it was coming, and so we have changed a lot of the modus operandi that we have been doing with that is concerned. That is all I would say on this. But it's not something that is going to take us by surprise, and when that time comes, rest assured that we'll respond sufficiently to the legislation whenever it is passed.
Okay, let's go back to the telephone. Release, good evening. Hello. Good evening, caller.
Good evening to you, sir.
Yes, can you speak up a little louder, please?
Yes, I'm close to my phone. Good night to Mr. Ferguson, and good night to Superintendent Curwen. Mr. Ferguson, I think you'll have to lend the government your service to do some training down at the training school in terms of if laws are made based on your reasoning, the police will have very little problem or no problem at all. Superintendent Curwen, I commend you highly, sir, because that is a line of thinking, a line of reasoning that will change a society. I have interaction with you from time to time, and some of your high command and even the public relations department, and you are so right. That is the approach, because we are dealing with a restless society. The society is restless, and if the police become restless, then you have chaos. So your line of reasoning as a senior police officer, all you have to do is to get your men and women in the force to adopt your line of thinking and reasoning. Diplomacy and psychology have to be the way to go. Sometimes you don't have the police doesn't even have to raise a finger. You just look, or you just wave one finger and you solve the problem. The police don't have to be spontaneous in many, many angles. So some diplomatic science, psychology, and those things, with your line of reasoning, I think, Mr. Ferguson, you will have to stick very closely to Superintendent Curwen. We have to change the society, because the politicians make laws, and is the laws incompatible with what the society wants? And we have a problem. When the government make a law, the policy makers make a law, the police have to execute it, whether it is right or wrong. So that is where the problem, that's where the police is getting the problem. And I think Superintendent Curwen, you're handling the matter the right way. Mr. Ferguson, your line of thinking is the right way. And if the government, the policy maker, make laws based on your line of reasoning, we'll have very little problem with our society.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much indeed. All right. Now, I want to go back, because earlier I did ask Superintendent Curwen a question as it relates to the politics. I'm not going back because I understand your restriction, but something I want to get cleared as it relates to the laws that direct the responsibility of a police officer, and I trust it is the Police Act. Can an officer refuse to take directive from a politician once he is keeping in line with the laws that guides his responsibility?
Godfrey, we are sworn to uphold and enforce the laws. And if there are instructions that are contrary to the laws, doesn't matter who it comes from, a police officer should refuse to allow himself to be used to violate someone's right or violate the law or disregard the law. We are creatures of statute. We are enforcers of the law. The parliament makes the laws and hand it over to us, and we enforce what is in the books. And to answer you definitively on this one, I don't think there are any person who should ask a police officer to do something that is illegal or unlawful. Or
Superintendent, ask him not to do something that he's supposed to do.
That is supposed to do. I quite agree. Either side of the fence, we need to be professionals. We've taken an oath to do our job. And it doesn't matter whether you're my senior officer, you're a politician, you're a government employee. If I'm asked to do something that is illegal, I will not. And if I'm asked to do something that I should do, I would do it. And I think that should be the thinking and approach of every police officer in our organization. We are sworn to uphold the law.
And my next question, if a situation like that arises, and let's say a junior officer refuses to carry out an instruction, will the hierarchy of the RGPF take the back of that junior officer?
Well, I cannot speak for everybody in the organization, but what I can say is that we will first have to look at the instruction that were given, the violation or refusal that were made, and if it is in keeping with the duties and responsibility of an officer, I do not see why the hierarchy of the force will not line himself up behind that particular officer. Because if you don't you will be sending the message that there is one rule and one standard for one person and a different rule and a different standards for other persons. But our organization have its rules. We have our mandate. And once you stick to the mandate of the police force and you are right in what you're doing, I don't see why right and proper thinking person will not stand with you for doing what is your job, what is your duty, and enforcing what you ought to enforce or refuse to enforce what you should not enforce.
Right. So indirectly, what we're getting is that a police officer should do his duty based on what is in the Police Act and not go contrary despite who it comes from. He's guided by the Act.
And I would be explicit in saying yes, Godfrey.
Thank you very much.
We have a police act, we have a police regulation, we have rules that guide us, we have policy directive that guides us, and if it's in the policy, it's in the policy. Why would I be asked to enforce something that doesn't have any bearing on me? You cannot force me to break the law. I will not allow myself to be used to break the law or to not do something that the law says I should do.
Right, let's go back to it.
Just before I go on, Godfrey, it's not about disrespecting anybody.
Right.
It's being professional.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the telephone. Release it. Good evening. Hello.
Good evening, Godfrey.
Yes, good evening. Go ahead.
I want to know what is a small amount and what is a small amount. Should the police...
Caller, the legislation has not yet been passed. Until it is passed, that's when we would know that, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Right, yes, the telephone number 435-2041. You can call with your questions. Let's go back to the telephone. Release it. Good evening. Hello.
Good night.
Yes, good evening, caller.
Good evening. I would like to find out if somebody is charged for being a child molester, if they are allowed to drive public bus with children in it.
Okay, thank you, caller. I think both Superintendent Curwen and Mr. Ferguson can chime in on that. Let's start with the Superintendent.
We have, Godfrey, we have no laws that says, first to start with, a man is innocent until proven guilty. And you do not start denying people their right based on an allegation. And even if that person becomes convicted, we do not have any laws that restrict him from employment. The mere conviction for a criminal offense does not mean that somebody cannot earn a livelihood. So unless and until we have legislation that goes in that direction, that individual will be entitled to earn a living through legal and lawful means.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson, can you speak to that as well?
Yes, well, Superintendent is correct. There is no law in place. It might be, and I'm not too sure. Did she say somebody who is convicted of a sexual offense or just who is a child molester?
Child molester, remember? Yes.
Right. So again, it's a matter of policy for the employer, whoever is employing that person. But one has to be careful, especially in small societies, especially with allegations. People say something and then everybody carries it, and people are sometimes innocently, maligned because, again, people deliberately say things about them, and that exists in society. But it's really, that will be a policy decision.
Okay, let's go back to the telephone. Release it. Good evening. Hello.
Greetings.
Yes, greetings, sir. Go ahead, please.
And good night to the panelists. Just 3 brief points, hopefully. One is that congratulations to the superintendent. I think that Superintendent Curwen becomes a home name from since the COVID period, and I hope I'm correct to say that there has been no other better choice to have someone as him during that period, or else maybe some of the incidences would have been worse. Secondly, I would like for the police, but here with the superintendent is there taking notes, from our brother Ruggles. Based on his comments, I think you should incorporate into the community policing program to have in every community to institutionalize this mediation team, whatever description you want to refer to it. Try right now to see how you can get in each community a pastor, more or less from every church, retired persons, such as the principal, as Brother Ruggles said, and some prominent JPs, justice of the peace, and some sports personnel. Install this in every community as part of your police program. In the past, I know you have made efforts to have police boys clubs and things like that to make these things gone with. And your modern day of community policing is to walk through the area. This is not sufficient. So if we can have many of the crimes being reduced, if you can incorporate some of the ideas, in particular what Brother Ruggles promoted. Finally, let me say here that when you're talking about improving your community policing, and I think in the news we talk specifically about obscene language, I pondered about it because I have had personal experiences and I have heard to the news and other persons their experiences, very sad. And I will not doubt that at least 50% of the incidences of crime, murder, killing, took place not spontaneously, but because of constant threatening languages which have gone just passed by. It's not only to say that people use threatening language in a conversation as part of our culture. We can differentiate, I think, between when it is just come out like that. But there are instances in which you have persons deliberately, and they mean what they're saying. Threatening language. People running out with cutlass in your property and threatening. And even when you go to the police station, and I think one of the callers have already mentioned, the procedure to get to the court is being frustrated. And some of the police in the community, they because you've been going to them time and time again, they see you as a troublemaker and they bypass it. So I would like for you to understand, I like the approach you are taking by saying you will up this whole thing about threatening language, and I hope you can do it. There are many times we have such statements coming from the police force, but I have not seen it materialize. I hope you can do it because indeed, threatening language is only God what caused. You don't have more crimes here, but it is something very serious about. Thank you very much. Continue the good works. And Godfrey, the devil advocate, but I think you'll get your master tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, caller. Now, let me, before you all respond, I have one question I want to put out there, and I think it would sort of incorporate the response that you may want to give to the last caller. So we have about 10 minutes remaining, so I'll have to split it 10-10. So let me start first with Mr. Ferguson. I'm going to give the superintendent the final word. Now, do you believe, sir, that, and I want to refer to it as lesser crimes, and let me just explain what I mean. We started with this whole confrontation issue, which is rather unfortunate, but lesser crimes, for example, speeding, excessive noise from vehicles, packing up vehicles and preventing the smooth flow of traffic. A lot of these, I hope you understand where I'm going. Do you believe that these kind of behaviors, gathering, drinking, the same using of obscene language, threatening language, all of that, do you believe that these lesser crimes, so to speak, can lead to bigger crimes, which can eventually result in problems for not just the police force, but also for communities? Mr. Ferguson.
Yes, well, it depends, Godfrey, but I think as a general principle, most of these come from an attitude. So, for example, if there is somebody that just goes about just cursing people, insulting people, threatening people, then that is not just the incident you're looking at, but it's a mentality. And that kind of mentality can lead to much bigger things in the future, because it's all about, I mean, you know, like murders. Some of these things come about, you know, for very simple issues, you know. A dumpling, $5, and issue an argument over $5, and you have a dead man. Very small issues, and that's why, you know, it's you know, as the saying goes, you know, it takes a community to raise a child. It's really, we have an important role in our respective organizations to play, and that is one of the you know, is the message out there. We need to change it. In fact, the last caller spoke about again, mediation. I'd mentioned it earlier on, and how the police, for example, can incorporate several of these, you know, retirees and others. But you know, there's a what you call the Impact Justice Program throughout the region, is funded by the Canadians. But you know, do you know there are several community trained mediations in Grenada, mediators that are not utilized at all? They have been trained years ago and they're not utilized, right? They're just there. No, these are critical people who can play an important role. And you know, there are so many people out there who are willing to assist, but most times it's reaching out to them and incorporate. Some people will be so happy, but you need to reach out to them, because as the saying goes, some people won't push up themselves, but they'll be happy if you check them to assist. And they can feel useful and feel that they're playing a role. So I'm saying, listen, the whole approach has to change. And it cannot be seen, listen, as the police among themselves, listen, trying to solve certain problems that they're not equipped to solve. They don't have the resources themselves to solve, but they can form partnerships in so doing and to, you know, reach out. You know, I always say, look at, for example, the High Court and how we treat with civil matters in the High Court. Our courts have a backlog of matters, you know, civil matters. But you know, probably the biggest project and probably the most effective project introduced by the court in 2004, you know what? Mediation. Court-connected mediation. So you're going to court to resolve a matter, and now the court has incorporated mediation as a tool to resolve matters. So you know, it gives the opportunity to say at a certain stage in the proceeding, I'll go and talk. Right? Lawyer, parties, everybody, go and talk and come with, and more, in the vast majority of instances, and I'm proud to say that Grenada leads the region in mediation just by changing the approach. Because if everybody waiting for the matter to be heard by a judge at the end of the day, one, they'll be waiting years, but at the same time, when matters are resolved by a judge, there are so many underlying issues that are left attended. The winner gloats, the loser vex. And it does not assist in repairing relationships. But you know what mediation does? There are people who have all kinds of problems, whether neighbors, family. They can sit across a table, you know, just talk their heart out, vent, and shake hands at the end of the day.
All right.
Come up with a resolution. That's the kind of creativity, Godfrey, that I'm referring to. That we need to look outside of the box. Look at the real problems that our society face and find creative ways where we can utilize our own people who are willing to help to solve the problem and not take it as our problem and try to deal with it.
Thank you. Superintendent Curwen, the same question. And I'm just going to add a little bit to it too. So these smaller crimes that we see, the excessive noise in vehicles, speeding, all of that, leading to bigger things. Your response to that, and in addition, in most cases, I think we know who some of the perpetrators are. Why aren't we removing them from the society? You have the final word.
But in a lot of these cases, we are making arrests and making inroads in some of the things that you speak of. But I used the word balance before. The citizens have rights as well. And we have to wait until the citizens commit offense before we can step in. So you speak about gatherings and crowds and so forth. You can gather. There is nothing wrong in gathering. In fact, our Constitution gives you, rights of assembly. When that assembling now infringes upon the law and an offense is committed, that's when we can move in, and we have been moving in and making arrests and doing charges. But I agree with you that some of this informal gathering and informal association, they do lead to bigger crimes, or they do lead to bigger things happening. And so we use a phrase in the organization that we say, we need to nip certain things in the bud. If there is a gathering, because what we have seen, in some cases where some people will park the vehicle up, turn the back up, turn the trunk up, and there are some huge speakers, and they would blast those speakers, and a crowd will gather. Noise pollution is an offense. Once that happens, we encourage our officers to move in and control. If we minimize the noise, we may send some of the crowd home. We may disperse and mitigate against what will come later. So we nip certain things in the bud. While you have the right of association and right of assembly, you do not have the right to break the law in terms of noise pollution. You do not have the right to speed excessively beyond the speed limit that the law provides. And so when these little things happen, what we may call little and trivial things happen, members of the community might say, oh, well, it's just an obscene language. But Mr. Ferguson made the point. It's not just what was said, but the attitude. It's not just driving fast, but you might be a habitual speeder. And so when these things happen, we need to move in and we need to nip them in the bud and prevent the escalation of bigger issues. In closing, Godfrey, I want to say something that the last caller has said. He made mention of the issue of our approach to threatening language. And recently I have, enunciated a few of our position on that. In the past, if somebody threatens you, what we have seen happening, you come to the police station and you make a report and you ask that a warning be issued to that person. We have in the past will reach out, find the person wherever they are and provide that warning. We are changing our approach on that. We are going to warn you still, but we're going to take you into the police station. By doing so, you need to understand the seriousness of threatening language. Threatening language is what becomes the harm of tomorrow, the maim of tomorrow, the dangerous harm of tomorrow, the cutlass-wielding individual. We no longer can take threats idly as we used to do 10, 15, 20 years ago. When somebody say they're coming back or they're going to get you, you better believe it that they have the means to come to get you. And so we're changing our approach, and we believe by doing that, we probably will be able to bring our harm offenses down. We are very concerned as to where our harm offenses are, where our threatening languages are, and so we are developing and devising different strategies to be able to employ to reduce what we currently see.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I have so much more questions I would like to throw at you, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I thank you, gentlemen, so very much. Mr. Ferguson, I thank you so very much, for accepting the invitation to be here on the program to discuss these very important issues. And we have expanded a bit on some other issues that I think are quite relevant. We have quite a bit of comments on the Facebook platform. I cannot go through after all, but I want to say thanks to all of our listeners and viewers on the Facebook, our viewers on GBN TV, our listeners of K105. We thank you so very much. Superintendent Curwen, I thank you, and let me also echo the same sentiments as some of our callers. We think that you're doing an excellent job. Thank you for being there. Thank you for putting the information out. And let me say this, our platform here at the GBN is available. That kind of education is important, so it is available, and of course we would like, there's an open invitation for you or other members of the force to come on the station and to help to inform the public and to educate so that people get a better understanding of what the relationship between the citizens and the police should be. Also, Mr. Ferguson, your role is so exceptional, getting people to understand what is involved, and the whole issue of not just police but also members of the community. They have a very important role to play, and I thank you, gentlemen, for that very, very much, and I look forward to having you on the program again. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and do have a good night.
Thank you, Godfrey.
Good night, Godfrey. Good night, listeners and viewers. Superintendent, good night.
Well, that's our program this evening, folks. We thank each and every one of you for staying with us. Thank you for all the comments. It's a pity we couldn't take all the calls, but of course time is limited and we had to get the information out there. We will endeavor to have Superintendent Curwen or some other member of the force back with us to continue to highlight these very, very important issues. And let me say this, I'm also calling on our citizens to be mindful that there are laws, and the laws should be followed. They are there so that we can have a decent society and that we can be a decent people. Thank you all very much. Don't forget, tomorrow evening, 8 o'clock, We Culture. Remember what you dream and remember the meaning of your dreams. I'll be with you tomorrow evening. Do have a good night. Thank you very much.